host, the distinguished New York lawyer, author, and lecturer, Alan Schnerman. Each week, Law Line will bring to you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. Mr. Schnerman and his guest will be taking your phone calls during the broadcast. The number for you to call is 247-8090. And now we introduce today's guest and our host, Alan Schnerman.
Welcome to Lawline. Today we're going to examine the field of real estate investments and syndications with our expert James Fenari, a partner in the law firm of Yablon and Solomon. Jim is a real estate lecturer for Citicorp and can be found in Who's Who in American Law. His firm specializes in economic shelters and real estate syndications. Joining me as a co-host is my colleague and partner, Benjamin Zalman. Hello, Jim. Hello, Ben.
Good evening.
Jim, for the opening question today, can you tell us what is a real estate syndication?
Real estate syndication, Alan, is where a promoter or a particular individual puts together a group of investors to buy one or more pieces of real estate and to spread the risk out amongst these various investors.
Well, what does an investor have to be aware of in looking at a syndication?
There are all kinds of things that can happen in a syndication and that an investor has to look at. An investor has to look at, first of all, whether the piece of property or properties that are involved in the syndication are really worth the price that's being paid for the property. He has to look at whether the syndicator has a good track record and has done well in the past, or at least has not had bankruptcies or other problems with his syndications. He has to look at whether the syndicator is taking a great amount of fees or commissions for finding the properties. And he also has to look at what the economic consequences are of purchasing into a particular syndication, i.e., is he going to be getting real money back from the syndication, or is he doing it just for tax reasons?
Those are two different goals, I take it. And are syndications created to satisfy each of those needs?
There are generally syndications. I put them into three different categories. They're the ones that give you very substantial tax write-offs, 3 to 1 or 4 to 1. And by that I mean for each dollar that you invest, you can get $3 to $4 in deductions. I call those peanut shelters because, like peanuts, once you buy one, you are forever having to buy new ones in order to take care of the tax problems that will invariably occur in the later years. The other types of real estate syndications are a conservative type of syndication, often done by large public houses such as Shearson or Merrill Lynch, where large numbers of properties are purchased, and the return on that is a modest return, 8 or 9%, usually tax-free. The last type is what I call a true economic syndication, the kind of syndication that one reads about where a property is purchased for a good price, the expenses of the property are fair, and the ultimate return to the investors is substantially more than what they have put in.
How liquid are those investments?
The syndications are generally very illiquid. That is, once you become a limited partner, which is the term for an investor, in most types of syndications, you're pretty well tied in. Now, what normally happens in a good syndication is that if the property is generating a lot of income, after several years, the syndicator will invariably try to buy out the limited partners. He'll try to buy back what he sold to you, and there will be money to be made at that level. The ones that you normally buy from the public offerings, that is from an investment or a broker-dealer, are more liquid. They will generally have the ability to, if you want to sell out, put another one of their clients in to that type of transaction.
In the normal syndication, do you usually have to spread your amount of payments over a number of years, such as $10,000 the first year, $10,000 the second year, and so on?
Not necessarily. It depends, again, on the syndication. Some syndications have one fee up front, that is one purchase price, and then you get deductions in the first year based upon that and based upon commissions, and then depreciation, as you would for any piece of commercial real estate. Other ones can be spread out over a number of years. The ones that are spread out over a number of years generally have more tax implications, because the idea is that there will be greater deductions in the first years based upon the fact that there are certain accruals that happen and certain types of deductions that can be taken in the first year.
Jim, a few years ago, we would get proposals for different types of investments, such as gas and oil deals and record shelters, things of that sort. That type of investment seems to be coming across our desks less and less these days, and more real estate. Is that your experience as well, and if so, why?
That is my experience. I think some recent numbers that I have seen are that there are now $2 in real estate syndications for every dollar in gas and oil. Last year there were about $2.5 billion of private offerings. This year it's expected there will be about $4 billion in private and about the same amount in public. So you're dealing with a very, very large syndication or very large pool of money. The gas and oil has obviously gone down because of the problems in the gas industry, the decline in price of the oil and per barrel, and the problems with the record shelters, the art shelters, the silver straddles that one reads about have caused people to go back to basics. And real estate has always been a basic investment, particularly in this country.
But even real estate syndications, to some degree, don't they have a red flag attached to them also to the Internal Revenue Service?
There are some that do. The typical ones that do is where a particular syndicator or promoter has had problems with the Internal Revenue Service in the past. The other type is where people get, I will say, greedy. That is, they want too much of a deduction in the first year for too little of an investment.
What's too much of a deduction?
The Internal Revenue Service has published some guidelines, and they have said that anything over a 3-to-1, that is $3 in deductions for $1 of investment, will generally be audited or reviewed. That doesn't mean that it will be disallowed, but it means that they will look at it very carefully. Anything over 3-to-1, for example, a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1, they will audit, and the likelihood is that they may very well disallow, that is, hit you for back taxes later on, because they will say that the transaction was not an economic transaction. That's the hallmark for the Internal Revenue Service.
How are these large write-offs, that is a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 or greater write-off, how are they developed in a real estate syndication?
They can be developed in a number of manners. One way of developing them is to have a piece of property which in reality is only worth, let us say, $40 million, be sold for $50 million. And there be what are called deferrals. That is, you don't really have to pay for it all at the beginning, but you can pay for it later on. But you take many deductions at the beginning. So what you are doing is you are taking much of a deduction at the beginning, but later on what will happen is that you will have very little deductions and you'll have what's called phantom income. That is, the partnership will be generating money, but that money will have to go to pay interest and other running expenses for which you've taken deductions in the first year. That's why I call those peanut shelters, because you now must buy another shelter to cover this phantom income which you're not receiving but you're responsible for paying taxes on.
Sounds like a treadmill.
It can be. It can be.
One of our viewers wrote a letter in, and they said, in their opinion, that the only ones who really make money on these real estate syndications are the syndicators themselves. Can you comment on that?
I don't think that that's a fair statement. Yes, there are many syndicators, and yes, the syndicators who know their business do make money. They should. That is their business. And there are syndicators who try to put together transactions which are solely for the benefit of syndicators. Those are the ones to stay away from. But by and large, the people with whom I am familiar and who are our clients are not of that variety in the sense that they try to put together economic transactions. And one of the things that we have found is if a syndicator is willing to put his own money into the transaction and leave that money in, it's a good sign that that is going to be a good economic transaction and that the syndicator is not going to be taking all kinds of fees out of it just to feather his own nest.
Getting into the general real estate area, Jim, what's your opinion of the real estate market now?
I think that the real estate market in many areas of the country is very, very alive. I think that the new construction has indicated that. I think there is a very substantial pent-up demand for housing. I think that the American public has always been enamored of the concept of the ownership of property. I think all our tax laws reflect that, and I think that the Americans generally want to own a piece of property. So since there is only a limited amount of property in the United States, it has caused prices to go up. Now, obviously, that is a generalization, Alan, and there are areas in this country that are obviously depressed, but in many of the urban areas, New York is a good example, areas down south in the Raleigh-Durham area, some places out in the west have all continued to go up, even though we have had some economic reversals in the past several years.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel that the shift of investment income into the real estate tax shelters or real estate investments may be a cause of inflation of general real estate prices in those areas that are considered hot?
I think it does have that effect to a certain extent. I think that there are only a certain number of properties that one can buy for syndication purposes, and when a lot of people chase the same piece of property, the price is obviously going to go up. I think of one piece of property in Boca Raton, Florida that I know of rather well, where the original asking price for the property was $50 million, and it was ultimately sold for $58 million. That is, as you said, an indication of driving the prices up because of the demand for such property.
But Jim, not everybody makes money in real estate. From time to time you hear about people losing money in real estate. Under what circumstances do people lose money?
People who go into real estate and don't do it with the realization that there may be a loss, with the realization that they have to know a market, that is, they have to know an area in order to anticipate or try to anticipate what's going to happen in that area. You cannot become an expert in real estate all over the United States. It's difficult enough to have some degree of expertise in a very limited area. You have to rely on others who are familiar with the real estate market to guide you as to what is a good area, what is a bad area, what is an up-and-coming area, and what's a fair price.
Well, don't you in some way rely on the syndicator for that type of expertise?
You do rely on the syndicator. Again, one of the hallmarks is the syndicator willing to leave some money into the transaction. If he is, then he obviously believes that it's a good transaction. If he wants to take all his money out in terms of commissions and fees, then it would lead me to believe that it may not be, over the long run, an economic transaction.
Well, what should the prudent investor do when he decides that he wishes to make either a tax-sheltered investment, whether it be a peanut-type investment, or one that has some true economic return? By the way, I'm going to digress for a minute. What is a true economic return in a tax shelter, real estate tax shelter today? What type of returns are people looking at?
We are looking at returns of approximately 20 or more % per year, and that's 20% partially or fully sheltered. And by that I mean that you will not have to pay taxes on that because there are certain legitimate deductions that can be taken which will avoid your having to pay income taxes on that return.
These are not the peanut shelters.
No, these are what I call economic shelters. These are ones where there is real cash coming in, coming back to the investors within the first year to 2 years, and that money is sheltered by the depreciation that is being generated by the building.
How does one seek out this type of real estate? How do you find them?
Well, it's often been said that the best gas and oil deals never left the Gas and Oil Club in Houston, and the best real estate transactions usually do not go much further than the lawyer's office or the offices of some of the larger real estate brokers in New York. And that's the very best transactions. You get them because an investor can look for them by contacting his accountant or his attorney, and they are normally the first people to know about a transaction, particularly in New York.
You know, it's interesting. We're getting, at our law firm, more and more of our clients are buying co-ops and condominiums, not to live in, but as an investment for the appreciation in the co-op and the condominium, and to rent it out in the meantime. What do you think of that investment?
I think that, again, if it is a decent location, if it is a location that has some potential for capital appreciation, I think that can be a very good investment. It's the kind of investment that one can keep looking at. You know it's there. You know that a property is not going to disappear overnight. You, of course, have the same problems that you would in any type of commercial real estate, and that is keeping it rented, keeping it decently maintained. But I think for a small investor, that is often a very good way of starting in the real estate market.
Okay, let's take some calls. Hello, you're on Law Line with Jim Funari, our guest, Benjamin Zalman, and Alan Schnorman. Can we help you?
Yes, are you familiar with the Upper West Side, the cost of co-ops and renovations on the Upper West Side in Manhattan?
Yes, I've had some familiarity with it.
Well, I had been renting an apartment, let's say the low 70s here for the last 5 years since I had moved here from Colorado, and I'm amazed just in the last 3 years the increase in co-op costs. Can't seem to find, say, a one-bedroom apartment for under $90,000 for an outside price. Now, let's say that I was able to get the funding for this, and I did purchase a nice brownstone one-bedroom apartment. What would be the potential off of Columbus Avenue of getting a good investment?
Well, you're talking about a residential property, and it's difficult for me to evaluate what the likelihood is of you're getting that kind of a property. I would say $90,000 to $125,000 is certainly the ballpark figures for a one-bedroom in a brownstone in that area. And I think that area has been up and coming over the past number of years. And I think because of the new commercial restaurants, boutiques and the like in that area, will continue to be one of the better up-and-coming areas where one can still get reasonably priced real estate in Manhattan.
Well, I feel as if I almost have to go ahead and invest in a co-op because not only that, because of what you spoke of just now, the restaurant cost, the restaurants in the area, the cost of apartments because of the buildings going co-op has gone astronomical.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
You're living in this apartment.
Yes, I am.
Do you like the apartment?
Yes, I like it very much.
That's probably the main criterion. You're in an apartment that you like, that you're happy with. You're buying it primarily as your residence, and of course, secondarily, although you're investing a lot of money, it's an investment. So if the primary purpose is to live there and you're happy, and certainly it's a wonderful area, then in 10 years from today, most likely you'll be happier than today.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good, thank
Thank
you.
you. Let's take our next call. Hello, you're on Law Line with Jim Funari, Ben Zalman, and Alan Schnorman. Can we help you? A little technical difficulty. We have that from time to time. Ben, you always say at our firm, there are 3 rules that you have regarding purchases of real estate.
Well, that's location, location, and location, Alan. And I think that that's part of the question that the viewer just called in. That is, will this location hold up? Is my investment going to be secure? He has seen growth in the past 3 years. He's seen a rise in the past 3 years. And again, he's talking about location. But it's amazing to me that one is able to provide for one of one's basic needs, that is shelter, and at the same time get tax advantages and tax benefits from it.
Okay, let's try again with the telephone. Hello, you're on Law Line with our guest, Jim Fenari.
Yes, I would like to know what sort of a discount an insider can expect on a building on the east side in the 40s.
Okay.
What would be a good discount?
A good discount for an insider would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 40% from the outsider price.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jim, when a building goes co-op, isn't there a period of time that the tenants get together and usually retain counsel, and the landlord, of course, has his attorney, and they negotiate this discount figure?
Yes. Invariably, in the initial offering, or the red herring, there are two prices set forth. One is the insider price, and one is the outsider price. But that's always subject to negotiation because, at least in New York, it's impossible to take a building co-op unless the tenants, or some substantial number of them, actually want to take it co-op. For an eviction plan, it's 51%. For a non-eviction plan, it's 15%. So it's the people who live there, by and large, who make the decision, and that gives them a great deal of bargaining strength with regard to the sponsor.
I find that everyone that I speak to, if they're not involved in real estate, either through their residence, through a summer house or a weekend place, want to get involved into real estate. What's the best way, in your opinion, to start involvement?
The best way, I think, is, again, to contact your accountant. Most accountants, if you tell them what you are looking for, and that is very personal, if you tell them that you want to have an investment, something that will give you a good economic return, very often we'll have one or more real estate syndications that they can put you in contact with, in which they will have evaluated. That is an excellent place to start.
If someone's buying an apartment, is there any difference between co-op and condominium? And do you prefer one as opposed to the other from an investment standpoint?
Well, the difference between a co-op and a condominium is that in a co-op, you don't own your apartment. You own shares in a corporation, and then you get what's called a proprietary lease that lets you live in your apartment. In a condominium, you actually own your apartment, and you own a portion of the common areas, the hallways and the like. In some respects, a condominium is preferable because it permits you to do things like making renovations, letting people live in it, and also subletting it without getting the permission of the co-op board. In a co-op, there are very strict rules preventing that type of thing without going to the board for prior approval.
Okay, let's take our next call. Hello, you're on Law Line with our guest Jim Fenari, our co-host Ben Zalman, and your host Alan Schnorman. Can we help you?
Gentlemen, I have a question this evening. I have been looking at a variety of real estate tax shelters, and I would like to know what things I should be looking at in the prospectuses in order to make a realistic judgment as to whether this is a shelter I should go with or not.
Some of the things you should be looking at are what kind of commissions the sponsor is going to be getting at the very beginning. Secondly, is the sponsor going to remain involved in the syndication or in the investment after it closes? That is he going to be a manager of it? One of the other things to look at is the sponsor going to buy a part of it as a limited partner? Again, as Mr. Zalman, as Ben said before, one of the things to look at is what is the location of it? And also, what kind of income can be expected from it? For example, is it a shopping center where one of the prime tenants is Kmart or some other large corporation where you know that the likelihood of continuing to receive monies for rental is very good? Or is it a number of very small stores where you have to worry every month about whether or not the rental is going to actually be paid?
Okay, thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
The last caller sparks a question that I have, Jim. You know, you get all these prospectuses, and usually they're a quarter of an inch, half inch, and I've even seen them an inch thick. Well, most people do not have the background to evaluate the spreadsheets, the numbers, the lawyer statements, the tax consequences. What should one do when they get that?
One should go to one's lawyer or go to one's accountant. I think it's foolish for a novice investor, even if you own your own home or your summer home, to try to evaluate on his own a real estate syndication and a real estate investment. It's truly madness on their part.
Well, time has come to an end. Let me thank you very much for coming and sharing your knowledge tonight with our viewing audience.
Thank you, Alan.
And thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Alan.
Next week, Lawline will get an insider's look at the criminal justice system with our guest, District Attorney Elizabeth Holtzman from Kings County. We hope to see you next week at the same time. This is Alan Schnorman, and goodbye from Lawline.
You have been listening to Lawline with your host, New York lawyer Alan Schnorman. For further information on this week's topics or any other questions you may have, you can write to Mr. Schnorman at Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 105. If you prefer to call during regular business hours, the number is area code 212-432-9111. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you again next week at the same time. This is Bill Burton Shaw speaking.